Welcome, welcome, welcome to yet another episode of the Linda Ogweno Political Show. Today we'd want to look at one of the most important documents should you be vying for a political seat in the next elections in Kenya. And this is the Election Offences Act of 2016. But before we go into the details of it, I want to appreciate Women United for Our Future for the support that they've given us in the production of this particular show. And so going right into it, the Election Offences Act of 2016, these are just the laws that you need to know and abide by so that you don't get yourself on the wrong side of the law. Remember that they're punishable in courts. And yes, the punishment goes from 500,000 up until 10 million. And if we look at it through the jail term, then we are talking from 1 year till 10 years. So because the consequences are so dire, you as a candidate, you want to find yourself on the right side. And also your supporters. Yes, you don't want your supporters to be doing a wrong thing and then they have to face the law. That I'm sure, especially if it's a close supporter, will affect you in one way or the other. Okay, so I just wrote down some of the pointers that I thought, but feel free to get this document. It is free online, and I've also included a link to where you are able to get your own free soft copy. So please equip yourself with this knowledge. Okay, so once I avoid all the description, the first thing it talks about is, I think what you and I know is that you're not supposed to register in more than one polling center. And when IEBC says you're not eligible to register as a voter, don't go ahead and register in another polling center. Remember that even if you aid somebody to do this offense, then you're also culpable. So for the officers and the commissioners who work within IEBC who may aid in an offense being committed, they will also be culpable and answerable. So when you also talked about registration, also don't register twice. Don't register in polling station A, then go ahead and register in polling station B. Again, when it comes to the voting day, do not forge the ballot papers. Do not print them if you don't have the mandate from IEBC to be able to do that. Once you have a ballot paper and you have already voted, see into it that that is the only thing that you have put in the ballot box. Don't put any other thing that is not the ballot box. That is not the ballot paper, And then don't leave a polling station with the ballot paper. Your supporter may be carried away and they want to show their allegiance to you, or they want to show how, maybe they're thinking there can be some cash reward after that. So they want to take a photo of the ballot paper and share it with you. No, that is not allowed, and they will get in trouble for doing that. Don't have ballot papers if you don't have the authority before a polling station is open or after it's closed. Don't have that. Do not produce a machine that makes ballot papers if you do not have the authority of IEBC. And I've already talked about printing of ballot papers. Do not make a mark to another person's ballot paper. Remember that you're supposed to, voting in Kenya is by secret ballot. So you may be somebody living with disability and you need support in terms of marking your ballot paper. Remember that you who is marking your ballot paper, you should do that by yourself. The person aiding you is not allowed to interfere with the choice of votes of the person you want to vote for. And that also applies for the commissioner or officer who is aiding that person. Allow them to choose and to vote for who they want to vote for. So if you're found pretending, I've already mentioned that if you're somebody living disability, you may want assistance. But now, if you're found pretending that maybe you're blind and yet you're not, that is an offense. So when you talk about the officers and commissioner, IEBC has commissioners that is in the top tier of the leadership, but we also have the junior officers who help in one way or the another. If these officers are also found to be aiding in offense, they'll also be culpable and answerable. So over and above that, if a commissioner is found to maybe announce results in a place that they're not supposed to be announcing results, Like in Kenya, you find that there's a polling station X, yet the results of that are announced in another location Y, which is not even a polling station. Those are offenses. If you find a commissioner who is not the one supposed to be there, or a returning officer, yeah, who's not supposed to be in that ballot polling station, that is an offense. And I'd want to mention to you as a candidate who will be vying the next elections that please see into it that you know the returning officer of that particular area. In Kenya, impersonation has happened. People who are not supposed to declare results are the ones who are. So make sure that you know, and you know their face, who they are, so that they'll be able to, you'll be able to follow through with them should something happen. If a commissioner sees an offense and they don't report this offense, that is also a wrong thing. They should be able to report offenses as and when they happen. If a commissioner is supporting or aiding another political candidate, or is in favor of another political candidate more than the other one, that is an offense. If he or she is giving instructions, those instructions apply to all candidates equally. So make sure you know all this. If a commissioner or an officer wants to prevent you from voting or your supporters, everybody has a right to equal voting rights. Okay. When you talk about maintenance of secrecy, we've already said your ballot is supposed to be secret. Nobody is supposed to know it. You're not supposed to disclose to somebody how you have voted. Somebody is also not supposed to insist that they want to know how you have voted, even if they're your strongest supporter. No, they're not supposed to let you do that. Or commissioners are also not supposed to diverge information as to the serial number or the ballot numbers of ballot papers. No, that is not allowed. When it comes to personation, make sure you're voting for yourself. Do not go and vote on behalf of somebody else. That is an offense in Kenya. Don't vote twice. If you have voted once, that's enough. You can now leave the polling station, and don't refuse to leave the polling station. You're supposed to leave the polling station. Then also impersonating an electoral officer. In Kenya, we know we have had instances even where police officers have been impersonated, I think even lawyers. So do not impersonate an election officer. But I want to mention to you that most of these atrocities happen during political party nomination process. Okay, remember, you can make it through a political party, and one of the ways political parties have different ways by which you can get to be the flag bearer of their political parties, and one of the ways they choose a candidate is through political party nomination process held through elections. And now this is one of the places where so many offenses do happen. In as much as political parties have their constitution and their bylaws that guide their operations, majority of them are abused through the political party nomination process. So you want to know this, and you want to stay woke. You want to be very, very alert on that particular nomination day, because some political parties in Kenya are strong in certain areas, and you find if you are their flag bearer, you are as good as some to the tune of 80% elected in those areas. So you want to be their flag bearers and you want to win that election, but yet they don't have watertight electoral systems. So if you find yourself in that space, fight so that the space gets to improve, so that it can work to your favor as those as the election process will be happening. So moving on, we're talking about voter bribery. It is an offense to bribe voters to vote for you or against you, or not even show up and vote. Okay, it is also an offense to bribe people to attend a rally or refrain from attending a rally. I am smiling because this has become it's a norm in Kenya, that for people to attend your political rally, you have to bribe them for them to be able to do that. Actually, mostly it just happens after the rally. And I wonder who is to blame. Who is to blame for this particular erosion in our society? Is it the electorates who insist and demand for this money. In Kenya, there are certain areas, even if you don't give people money, they don't even think you're a serious candidate. Is it the politician who gives the money to them? Is it ODPP who has not held them accountable? Is it you and I who've probably not gone and sued them? Because some of these things are done in broad daylight and evidence is there, and yet no action is taken, so much so that it has become a norm for people to attend any rally. They have to be bribed, yet it is stipulated in the Election Act that this is an offense. I want to leave it to you and ask you that in whichever position that you hold, in whichever space that you are, do that which is right. And let me do that which is right on my space, so that collectively you and I can play a role in seeing into it that Kenya becomes a better country as far as this is concerned. Okay? So also bribing somebody to step down for you as a candidate, that is an offense. And also accepting bribes to step down is an offense. Please remember that there are people in Kenya who vie and they have no intentions of making it to the ballot. They're just candidates and they're waiting to be bought off, and then they will step down. Or maybe they have been planted by another candidate. So if you find yourself in that situation, you may want to just start thinking early and imagine, if that situation you find yourself in it, what are you going to do and how are you going to respond? But remember that bribing somebody to step down for you is an election offense. Okay, so when you talk about undue influence, this just talks about using threats to compel someone to vote in a certain way. Okay, compelling people to refrain from being a candidate. Okay, talks about using violence, to influence election results, using violence to influence somebody who had voted to name the person they had voted for, or to name and to show you the ballot papers. These are offense. And if you have voted, as I've said, nobody is supposed to know how you have voted. It is your own secret. Okay, remember, politics has a lot of intimidation and threats that happens there. So if you'll be vying, just be prepared to have a back of steel. Okay, so number 12 talks about use of security organs, using public officers or security organs to compel persons to support a person. And the other thing I'd like to add to this is that security officers, unfortunately, some of them in Kenya have also been used in a very negative way to influence election results. If I'm to give you an example, you find that on the election day, there's a small fracas that happens, and quickly a tear gas canister is thrown and everybody runs away from it. Even the returning officer will run away, and they'll not go back and pick the ballot box and run away with it. And you find that this police officer who's throwing this tear gas is in the atrocity that is happening in that particular polling station. They know what they are doing, and it's very intentional. And when they throw this tear gas and that there's chaos, ballot boxes are either replaced or they are kicked, or you find some candidates had mobilized their supporters and they came and they voted early. So they know that by the time this chaos is being caused, 90% of maybe the votes cast are already in their favor. So even if the election is stopped at that particular point, they already been declared a winner. So be woke on the election day. Be woke. And I've said most of these things happen in the political party nomination process, or an election has to, security officers are escorting a returning officer, I don't know, to go where. Sometimes it is not a very genuine case. It has already been premeditated and prearranged. So stay woke. Election offenses talks about just publishing things that you're not supposed to be publishing if you don't have the authority. Falseful withdrawal of a candidate. As a candidate in Kenya, you can wake up in Kenya and you can wake up one particular day and find bloggers have posted everywhere the way you have stepped down. There are election materials, posters everywhere the way you have stepped down, or the way you have married somebody else, or just some propaganda that just makes you step down. There's no way you get you overcome it, and these are probably usually done very close to election, a day or two after election. So it's hard for you to even have a comeback from it. It is an offense. So toy with the idea and ask yourself, what is the worst that my opponent can do? What is it that can bring to a halt my candidature. Yes, it's an offense, but sometimes it's a little too late. By the time you are going to court, maybe already results are out, but it is an offense. Just know it is an offense, but that does not stop you from preparing and asking yourself, what is the worst my opponent can produce, and how do I get to have a comeback from that? But from the person who is doing this, just know it's an offense. You can also be kidnapped. Yes, that is a forceful withdrawal, so that you just don't show up. You're a no-show. Yes, remember to continue watching this channel. We'll continue talking about these things, and even security. How do you guarantee yourself security so that you don't find yourself kidnapped and you cannot show up for your own elections? All right, so we're talking about forged nomination papers. You can find yourself with forged nomination papers unknowingly. For example, through a political party, you could be having the false nomination papers. You know, our political parties still have a long way to go in some of these things. So you find a political party has given a nomination certificate to person X, Y, and Z. So who has the original one? Maybe you're the one who has the fake one, and then you take the fake one and go present it. But over and above that, they're the fake documents. You know, maybe you've not gone to school and it's a requirement that you have probably a degree or a KCSE certificate and you don't have, and you go forge them. Just know that that is an offense. Okay, I've already talked about printing materials without the authority, using language that is threatening, preventing a political party from holding meetings. And this one, I know of the state preventing political meetings from happening for one reason or the other. So my question is it right when the state is the one preventing political parties from holding meetings? And is it an offense when somebody else does? I leave that question to you to answer. Okay, so preventing commissioners from conducting civic education or even accessing polls, that is an offense. Making false statements, publishing false informations to prevent people, or creating fear on election day. You find that sometimes your opponents can just create fear, unnecessary fear. It is not even based on something, but it's just created, it gains momentum. So that you find on election day, there's a particular group of people who just will not show up to vote just because there's this thing that had been purported that is going to happen. Especially, you know, women fear elections, they fear violence, and maybe they're your biggest supporters. So when they hear that is going to be violence, that they just abstain, and that can affect you. So yes, it is an offense, but also prepare for that and know the political environment that you're preparing for. And should you find yourself in that situation, how are you going to counter it? Okay, so we talk about use of public resources. A person shall not use public resources for the purpose of campaigning during an election. It is very clear. But question is that the practice on the ground? Okay, no government to advertise achievement in media, banners, or holding public spaces during election. You find that you may want to use a venue, a government venue for your function, but the government refuses. Just either to frustrate you or just they are holding it. So this has happened in Kenya. It is an offense. Okay, so an MP, an MC, a governor or a deputy governor to state the facility attached to them. This is just to say that if you already have public resources that are within your jurisdiction and you're using them, so that you state them within the stipulated period, within 14 days from the date of notice. I would want to hear from you. Does that happen? Is it the practice? What is the feedback? Because Election Offences Act of 2016 says it's an offense if they don't submit those resources. Public officers are not supposed to be involved in political party activities, and that's why you find that if somebody was had an office within a political party and now they have been appointed or nominated to, let's say, a cabinet position, they get to resign from the political party. This is what influences that decision. But over and above now resigning, they're not supposed to be engaged in activities of that political party. There's a gray area because you find somehow they get involved, maybe not in a very direct way. So it's very hard to put this in perspective or to hold them accountable, but Elections Act is clear on it. Okay, so you're also not supposed to develop projects that will you'll use in case you'll be vying, you're not supposed to develop projects for the government that you'll use in your favor or use to favor somebody else. This is yet another place that has very gray areas, because you'll find it gets abused, not in very direct ways, but it gets abused. You find still people who are serving as state officers having projects that are skewed towards a particular candidate or towards a particular political party. Okay, so unlawful expenditure talks about more or less ferrying people on the election day from their homes to the election center where they're supposed to vote. Please know that that is an offense. You're not supposed to do that. If your opponent finds you doing that, they can open a case against you. This also applies to ferrying voters. You could be popular in a certain area. Maybe you're popular in area A and you want to go via in maybe your rural home in area B, and so you want to ask people to transfer their votes from area A and area B, and you pay them to do that. That is an offense. It's not allowed. But there's a clause that says that there can be an exemption where there is no access totally. Maybe there's a bridge that people use to come and vote, and that bridge has even collapsed. So, okay, so that can be looked at, but it can't be that it's favoring your voters only. It has to be favoring everybody that is there. And I want to believe IEBC should also be in the know, so that it should be even them making those transport arrangements, or you and them. I guess that, but that is what the act says. Use of technology. We are in the day and age of technology, okay? So the day and age of passwords. Even IBC is using KIMS-KIT and technology for their data, for interpretation, for relaying of results. It's in technology everywhere. So if you're found guilty of stealing maybe a KIMS-KIT, of hacking into the system of IEBC and interfering with data, of changing passwords, or just getting hold of people's passwords and having unauthorized access to the system, and yet you unauthorized access, all that, you will be answerable. That is not supposed to happen, and you will get yourself in trouble. All employers are supposed to see to it that their employees have access to voting on the election day. I want to believe the government has sorted this, because on the election day, usually it's a national holiday, so everybody is able to vote. What I'd want to say is that if you'll be vying through a political party, ask yourself how you're going to overcome the challenge, and see into it that your voters have managed to vote, whether they are employed or whether they are in self-employment, because usually those are not national holidays, and they may not end up voting for you just because they have to show up at work. So how are you going to mitigate that risk? Ask yourself that and start planning for it early. Okay, remember that aiding an offense is also an offense in itself. So do not think that because you're probably not the one doing it, you will not answer. Also, the other thing I'd want to mention is be careful with the people in your campaign team. Sometimes you have a mole in your campaign team, or sometimes people can just give you very wrong advice, and they can come and inform you maybe your opponent is doing X, Y, and Z. Let's say your opponent, for example, is bribing people on the queue on the election day, and so they tell you that your opponent is planning to do that, so you should also do that. Don't do it because somebody else is doing it. Don't do it because somebody else probably has done it before and gotten away with it. Because sometimes it is you who has a mole. Sometimes it is you who is being set up. Maybe your opponent is not even going to bribe people on the queue. Maybe this person is just telling you this so that you do it, and then your opponent gets to have the evidence. And remember, if it's somebody from your team, they'll have solid evidence, and then you end up being disqualified as a candidate. So just know yourself and do that which is right, and know that sometimes it is you being set up. As a candidate, and all candidates in Kenya, you will be required to sign the you will be required to sign the electoral code of conduct. There's nothing wrong with starting to acquaint yourself with it early, so that you know what you'll be signing for and what is expected of you. Okay, the body that is mandated with the responsibility of enacting this Election Offences Act is the ODPP. But I want to ask, Is it their responsibility to do all these things, or you and I also have a part where we are able to play? I want to find out. Will you be vying in the next election? Is it your first time vying? Do you think that the contents of this episode have helped you in one way or another? If the answer is yes, I want to welcome you to watch the next episode as well, because the purpose of this particular show is to see into it that good leaders get to win elections in Kenya by training you about politics and political process. Of course, so that you and I can get to see into it that Kenya has better governance. Thank you for watching till very next. Thank you for watching up until this time, and yes, you are welcome to watch the next episode again. See you.